Yeah, I do. Because again, if you don't have empathy, you don't make any kind of human connection. And so I think that's a big part of being depressed or having anxiety. So I think it definitely connects together.
I absolutely do, because what happens to you when you get everything you want and it's not enough? Or you never get what you want and you don't have any way of communicating that.
Just act like a gay girl. I don't want you to have the 10 for 100. I don't want you to have the 10 for 135. You're a gay girl. You're acting like a gay girl. I don't want you to have the 10. This is not a man. This is a gay, stupid, weak-waisted, mentally equivalent girl.
Leave. Kirk, we got someone from Santa Rosa coming down to pick up a lot of stuff. She'll be here soon.
You know, I need a lot more space between me and Lee. You're a mentally equivalent girl. Don't want me to have this 10 for 135. There's a lot more space between me and Lee!
Excuse me. Everything these days is moving at the speed of light. It's both exciting and terrifying where we're all headed. Even then, I was full of empathy. I was constantly aware of my surroundings, even time itself. A reminder of where I am, what my purpose is, if anything, what I can do about it. And so, I became a photographer and filmmaker. I captured the world through my eyes. What will be my next adventure? I started noticing how the world was filled with people with vivid imaginations and all kinds of interpretations. I wanted to hear their opinions on empathy. My first question, are we moving further away from humanity?
Oh, that's a big one. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, it's the same as it's ever been. The only reason we're feeling this way, I think, is because technology is allowing us to see in real time or react in real time to things that have always been pressures. Once upon a time, if you wanted to communicate something like what the internet can today, the only people who could do that were newspapers or magazines or television stations with really big productions. So a handful of people could craft a narrative. You didn't necessarily know what people actually felt. You didn't know how they were responding to things or what their genuine opinions were. Now with the internet and technology and the fact that we've got a computer in our pocket that's online 100% of the time, and the ability for us to communicate with whoever we choose, now a lot of this seems omnipresent and always there. And it feels like, oh my gosh, we're losing our humanity, we're falling apart. No, I don't think that's the case. I think we've always had these feelings, but what you're seeing now is volume, and you're seeing immediacy. And sometimes immediacy doesn't give you the chance to really consider a take. Whereas back in the, say, 70s or 80s, it might have taken a few news cycles to actually have had something settle and, okay, that was a false alarm, or oh, that wasn't really the case, or maybe we overreacted to this. But now, because news is on 24/7 all the time from every place, you have to fill that.
Yeah, we see it more for sure.
Okay, I think that you have two ways of looking at this. I do believe that is happening, that people are moving away from empathy, but I also think you have a good deal of people who are moving more towards it.
So we're currently so connected with the world because of social media, because of the internet. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword right now, where we're able to connect with everybody, but because of social media and how we perceive ourselves and how others look at themselves, we are more about ourselves. So we should be more connected because of the internet. We should be more empathetic towards everybody. But unfortunately, we may be more about ourselves because of the internet.
I think we are moving farther away, but every time I feel like it's twofold. We move farther away, but there's always a group of people to try to bring us back. But if you look at what's going on across the world, there's famine, war, flooding, earthquakes, and in other countries we're talking about who didn't give a standing ovation or who wore what to this award show. You know, it definitely shows where we are with empathy, I think, in this moment in time, how far away we're moving. That's what I would say.
I think the world lacks empathy towards their environment. I believe that the use of plastic bottles in the ocean and violating the sea creatures that are in the ocean is definitely a lack of empathy towards the planet.
Unfortunately, I do think that people are becoming less empathetic, and I think the pandemic may have made things a bit worse. When people are happier in their lives, I feel like they're able to put themselves into other people's shoes, but given the pandemic and all the frustrations that have happened and us isolating from each other, it's made it so that we've dehumanized people and we can think of them as others as opposed to us, and that's just an unfortunate ramification of the pandemic. Hopefully we can reverse that now that we're normalizing, but only time will tell.
Yes, I feel like there is a lack of empathy in our environment and towards each other. And I feel like because of the news and social media, just anything put on the internet, people are desensitized to that and they don't realize that there is a lack of empathy.
I do, and I hate to say that, but it's true. I do feel that I'm noticing there's a lack of empathy between individuals that I run into every day, even my own friends. And then, of course, if you watch the news, the world is just becoming one big crazy fight. So um, I'm not sure about the. I think people are empathetic about nature. I think people really want things to be better here on the planet as far as keeping the planet alive for us. But I think people feel their hands are tied around that they can't really do much. But to answer the question, honestly, I really do believe that people are losing their ability to have empathy. I got a feeling a lot of people don't even know what that word means, to be honest with you. So, yeah, sad.
As I was writing my questions on empathy, I thought about my uncle, who died due to reckless driving. Being inside a fast car or even watching others drive dangerously makes me uncomfortable. Even at my own workplace, we have drivers who could easily strike and kill shoppers in the shopping center. My second question, is road rage a contributor to lacking empathy, spreading like a virus? Or is it a social norm?
I hate that I always hear about road rage. For me, I try to be really mellow because I always think I'm not a perfect driver. So I always try to give people a little leeway because I know I'm probably going to make a mistake like that too, when I'm driving. So I think I just don't understand it. People get so mad about things where they're not perfect drivers either.
A lot of it is just very blown up, and maybe I've just been lucky. I haven't really had that many experiences where I've had to be in that kind of a situation. Maybe I'm not going to pretend that I'm a perfect driver or that I've never cut somebody off or done something accident in that regard. But for the most part, it's a lot of wasted energy. And if you're going to spend that much effort or get that frustrated about it, something's wrong. You've definitely got something in your life that needs to be addressed.
Has gotten worse. And it's because with the last few years, with people already being socially distanced from one another because of COVID, they've actually forgotten how to act as a person inside of a society, when the focus has been to protect ourselves and our family alone from an existential threat, we've retreated back away from society and into our own sort of selfish motivations. And I think that's reflected not just in road rage, but also in interactions that are people having on a day-to-day basis, wherever two people are meeting, whether it's online at a supermarket, parking lot, or on the road. I think that we've actually lost sight of the fact that we do live in a larger society, and it's not just us that are out there.
Whoa, did you see what he did,
Faggot, queer, fairy are some of the things I was called growing up. I can still hear my bullies inside my head. Why are they treating me like this? I didn't do anything to them. I demanded justice from teachers and even the school counselor to put it to an end, but they didn't do anything to protect me. They pretended like it never happened. At the end of 8th grade, we had a ceremony giving beautiful plaques for specific achievements to the middle school graduates. I thought, since I was on the honor roll for 3 consecutive years, I would receive something, but to my amazement, all my bullies received rotten awards and standing ovations, while I came home empty-handed. Bullying is as old as time itself. Nevertheless, I feel for anyone who gets bullied, and seeing trolls walk the earth without any consequences for their actions infuriates me to no end. Bullies continue to spread, and I, for one, feel there should be something we all can do about this. My question: we have bullying in schools, workplaces, and even on the internet. Do you feel we have a responsibility to ensure better monitoring and control, and maybe even pursue legal action to prevent gun violence and suicide?
I remember in 8th grade when my teacher would come to class crying, and she would also be so upset because of how the students treated her and would not pay attention. I've witnessed bullying firsthand through my team and through my old friend group. I'm glad I don't hang out with them anymore, and I've distanced myself because I love being empowering and encouraging other people than putting other people down. I know that I would love to include everyone that I can with whatever events that I'm going to, because bullying people is just not cool.
Bullying is one of those situations that sadly, no matter how you monitor it, no matter how you try to get somebody to deal with the situation, and it pains me to say this because I've had to deal with this with my kids, and I had to deal with this myself growing up. The only way that you deal with a bully, and this is going to sound awfully regressive, I guess, is put them in their place. And sometimes you have to do that at great risk to yourself. It's entirely possible that a bully will not step down unless you take them on at their own game. And it might mean, hey, I'm sick of getting picked on. I'm sick of getting punched in the back of the head or whatever. So I'm going to have a fight, and I might lose a tooth in the process, or I might sprain an arm or whatever. But I'm not going to let this person decide that they can do this anymore. They're not going to participate in this anymore, or if they try to, it's going to hurt them every bit as much as it's going to hurt me.
Yeah, we've kind of told our kids that if someone picks on them, to fight back. And even if they get in trouble at school, I know that's probably not very popular, but that's how we feel. Because bullying can really cause a lot of problems. Like, kids are committing suicide from bullying. They are bringing guns to school. So it's a big problem.
Also, it's important to realize that if your child is being bullied, probably the worst advice you can give them is say, ignore it and it will go away. It absolutely will not. You have to deal with it directly.
Yeah.
And I told our kids growing up, I said, I do not want you starting fights. But if somebody picks a fight with you, you have my permission to knock them to the ground and make sure they don't get up. And if I'm called into the principal's office because of it, I will ask, did you start this fight? If the answer is no, then I will high-five you right in front of said administrator and say, look,
sad.
They answered this. And if you wanted to know what my feeling is of it, is I do not wish for my children to be targets. And I don't want them to be aggressors. I don't want them to be in a situation to where this even has to be a problem. But if it's not stopping and you're not going to address it, I give them sanction to address it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as far as bullying is concerned, it is our duty to help with the problem. It's very difficult to do on something like an internet platform because of free speech, because everybody is dispersed in different parts of the world, there's different laws. But in a more controlled environment, like at work, like in school, it should be more controlled, it should be more monitored. There should be some disciplinary action as well. Whether that's a legal action, that's tough to say. That should be more a case-by-case basis. But bullying should be prevented. One way to do that is education. So not only should we be talking about what bullying is, but what is the underlying cause for the bullying? Is it differences in age, sex, race, whatever it may be? The education needs to be there.
And don't forget, folks, when you goes to the polls today, a vote for Popeye means free ice cream for all the kiddies.
All right, men, step right over here and get your free cigars.
And what we needs is bigger elephants in all our zoos. Oh my gosh.
Now just remember your old pal Bluto at the polls today, fellers. And there's an extra cigar for each and every vote you give me. Yes, sir.
And furthermore, I promises 2 cans of spinach for every pot. Here's me past record, folks, which speaks for itself.
Growing up, I was involved with the Scouts, where I learned to be a leader. I also was involved in student government for my high school senior class. I even remember watching debates closely to determine who I wanted to have as our next president of the United States. Debates were interesting, and no matter who you voted for, we were able to agree to disagree. Sadly, I've witnessed over the years the most tension in politics. It seems filled with threats, violence, and a sense of danger. How did this ever happen? My fourth question: do you feel politics, especially these days, are becoming more of a danger to society?
Oh, that's a really good question. The problem is one of the last political candidates made kind of their signature by promoting a bully society. If they didn't like someone, they would say something nasty about it. And the people who were inclined to feel that way would jump on board. It gave them free rein to feel that way. I think that they've always been there, but I think that you need a moral leader, because if you don't, people are going to interpret what this person is saying for their own devices. So, yeah, it's been difficult.
Absolutely. Politics is supposed to be for the people, but we're seeing a lot of propaganda and a lot of messaging that kind of isolates different groups and just perpetrating lack of empathy more and more. And it could be, as much as we like to say that we've gotten farther away, we're more progressive, but a lot of times we're not. And it shows up in our politics and how things are enforced or governed, lack thereof. And I would say it's more of a threat and danger sometimes. You know, a lot of people don't feel protected right now, I would say.
Politics has definitely become more polarized, which is very dangerous. We've seen times in history, like during the Nazi regime, where people have created extreme polarized views, and we see where that leads to. I think the media has a part to blame in this. They're always having pundits on that have the extreme views of both sides. I can't tell you the last time I remember seeing a moderate pundit on TV explaining the mainstream compromise view. And I think that's what we need. It's, that's the voice that isn't given with the Fox Newses of the world, the CNNs, etc. And If we were to model that better in the media and society, I think it would give people permission to be more moderate and to seek common ground as opposed to digging their heels in their positions.
Hello again. It's time now for the weather. Well, the heat wave that's been with us since the weekend is showing no signs of letting up this week. Today's temperatures could climb to the high 30s by late afternoon.
Growing up, I enjoyed warm weather. Dipping in a lake or a pool, the warm sun on my bare skin, or the fact that I didn't have to wear a jacket or a sweater over me. I felt as if anything was possible. Of course, now and then I would read or hear record-breaking temperatures today, but I don't think any of us took it very seriously. Nevertheless, over the years, it has become very apparent that our Mother Earth was starting to deteriorate, from melting icebergs to dirty pollution. I was curious as to why it occurs so frequently and in such large magnitude. Of course, people like former President Donald Trump wouldn't take it seriously, and his followers would back him up as always. My heart sank when he verbally insulted Greta Thunberg by saying she needed to work on her anger management problem and to go to an old-fashioned movie with a friend. My fifth question asks, do you feel that global warming is a significant or huge factor that contributes to the lack of empathy?
Global warming, unfortunately, is a thing. It's real. It is, unfortunately, getting worse. It's been proven scientifically. And yes, I do feel like that is because of a lack of empathy towards nature, towards the world, towards the globe in itself, and also lack of empathy towards future generations. Unfortunately, a lot of what we do this day and age is what can we do for ourselves now? How is it improving ourselves now? How can it help us as a society right now? But a lot of those things that would help right now are going to affect future generations. That kind of comes down to a lack of empathy.
I don't think it's the lack of empathy that leads to global warming. I think it's more that people don't really understand cause and effect well enough. We hear about global warming, we don't see necessarily how it affects our day-to-day lives. We like the convenience of driving our cars, and we don't see necessarily a lot of downside. Maybe there's some pollution that happens once in a while. I tell you, if it was more directly connected to our lives, for example, if somewhere were to say we have to close Yosemite because of global warming, I think people would really understand that a lot better. They would be like, wow, I love going to Yosemite, and we need to close it because the world is warming up. That would hit directly in home. It would make us realize that there are steps we have to take, otherwise there are things we're going to lose.
I miss conversations where we could spend hours on different topics without the fear of being put down for our differences of opinions. Hearing others talk taught me something new, or gave me an opportunity to get to know them better. Now, if we don't agree on something, we'll block people, because our conversations are not living up to our own standards. We do that with complete strangers on social media and even our own friends and family. And let's not forget that there are those who are extremely defensive and will become toxic or even dangerous if they feel their egos have been damaged in some shape or form. So I asked, do you feel that we can no longer agree to disagree peacefully? Do you feel we can change this behavior?
You can't disagree with people anymore. It almost always turns into a fight again. People are ready to fight. They're angry. I think it's from post the COVID thing, being locked up for all that time. I don't know. But I believe it's also it's not just a lack of empathy, but it's also a sign of narcissism.
I think we live in a time where cancel culture is, if you don't believe in what I say, cancel you, fire you, whatever the case may be. I think it can be changed, and in some ways I do feel like it is being changed, because for every culture, that cancel culture, there's another culture of people saying, hey, this isn't right. You can't just because this, or you can't just because someone said this. I think if more people thought about or had a little bit more compassion, we could move away from or move more towards agreeing to disagree. I don't know when that'll happen, but right now um, we're very much in this individualistic mentality, and I think it's something can be done so long as people keep speaking their minds and keeping the human condition at the forefront. I think we can.
Guys got this chick hostage with a gun. Oh my god, this is crazy. Holy shit! Holy shit! I just got that shit on camera.
He ain't gonna screw with that cop again.
Damn, son! Yeah. Oh my god. I just saw this.
I remember covering behind the scenes for an indie feature film in Oakland, California. 2 armed, masked men came crashing onto our set. One of them knocked me down onto the hardwood floor, and he pressed his cold gun on my neck. I watched them steal my camera and my lens. Our team sat completely shocked and utterly silent as the muggers went about looting us. This incident changed my life forever. After doing some soul searching, I saved up my money, and I bought a better camera and more film gear. But I have to say, I never wanted to buy a gun from that experience. In fact, I was the victim of 2 gun violence incidents, but again, I never wanted to own a firearm. Gun violence is growing by the numbers, and needless to say, I wanted to know if empathy has gone missing from our lives. My question on this topic asks, do you think owning guns is a lack of empathy? Do you feel gun owners need to take more responsibility and empathy toward victims of gun violence?
We have a Second Amendment that, interestingly enough, has in the past had laws made to change that shall not be infringed. Right now, that's a popular phrase that a lot of people love to use. This whole, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, and it's very heavily pounded upon. However, for anybody who, I was very young at this time, but for anybody who was alive during the late 60s and early 70s in California, they noticed that gun reform happened rather swiftly. And it happened rather swiftly by a governor by the name of Ronald Reagan, who signed pretty sweeping gun reform into law as soon as the Black Panthers started showing up armed with guns. All of a sudden, that the right to own guns shall not be infringed. Well, suddenly we had a whole bunch of ways that we could do that. Racist much? Yeah, absolutely. But it goes to show, depending upon what happens and who's carrying the guns, I'm willing to bet you can change that narrative very quickly. And that's a sad indictment on who we are and what our culture has become. Yes, I do feel that many people are terribly unempathetic when it comes to guns. However, I also do not wish to paint with a broad brush actual sportsmen. I know that people hunt. I know that people hunt very ethically. I know they hunt for food purposes. I know they hunt for sport purposes. I also know that they keep their guns locked. They keep them safe. They practice gun safety. They have actually gone through and in the gun handling and all that. I have no beef with those people. None whatsoever. I am a black powder enthusiast myself. I have a 1750 Queen Anne pistol that I shoot at Renaissance fairs and festivals and reenactment events, and I know how to take care of that, and I know what it takes to do that. Interestingly enough, because it is a black powder implement, it's not considered a firearm. I can literally carry it anywhere. I don't recommend it, but I could. But there's a difference between that and the willful walking around just brandishing guns going, it's my right, I can carry this anywhere I want to. That is a distinct lack of empathy. And sadly, there's a lot of people who feel that that is appropriate. And to me personally, whenever I do see that, my initial reaction is, what on earth are you afraid of? Why is this something you feel you have to display so vigorously and proudly? Yeah, definite lack of empathy. And I also want to say to those who do handle guns ethically and with care and with patience and with respect, my hat's off to you. I like to consider myself one of you.
Yeah, I think if gun owners had more empathy toward the victims of gun violence, they wouldn't own guns in the first place. And maybe if they saw some of the results of these gun violent victims, they would rethink their actions. I have a friend who accidentally shot his son coming in late, thinking it was a burglar. I think maybe he probably doesn't own a gun anymore. He got to see firsthand what happens with that sort of thing. So, yeah, yeah.
Anyone who works with the general public needs to understand that this is a demanding profession. I have worked for a large supermarket for the past 9 years. The things I have seen and heard with my own eyes and ears are heart-wrenching. Disgusting restrooms that need to be monitored and cleaned, messy trash cans, and the rude customers who sometimes threaten the overworked checkers as they scan their food. We even have frequent police interventions whenever the manager deems they are necessary. This job is not only difficult, but has become increasingly dangerous. Many general public jobs are so demanding and stressful, and yet citizens don't seem to understand this. Why? A badge or even an apron doesn't mean they are purposely trying to make life difficult. I can assure you that. I feel this needs to be addressed and hope maybe I can shed some light on this topic. My 8th chapter addresses this. Grocery stores, hospitals, and any job that deals with the general public every single day can be very difficult. Do you think the general public has empathy, whether they're going to the hospital for a checkup or grocery shopping?
The general public, unfortunately, it can't be a requirement for them to be empathetic, but everybody should just have empathy in general. Growing up from a young age to adulthood, there are so many instances where empathy is needed. So unfortunately, I can't say that it needs to be required, but it should be a norm for society to be empathetic, not only for healthcare workers, not only for somebody who's working at a grocery store, but just for your fellow neighbor, just for somebody walking down the street. Empathy should be a norm in general.
Oh my God, I don't even know where to start with this one, to be honest.
Yeah, take your time.
No, my wife is a medical worker, and her job before the pandemic was already quite difficult. After and during the pandemic, she's noticed that people have gotten much less patient, more aggravated, less understanding. It's made what was already a difficult job for her nearly impossible. I wish that they could just spend a day walking in her shoes, just to understand how difficult it is when you're wearing all this protective equipment, you're hot, you can't breathe, and then to have people like scream at you and not understand how difficult your job is frustrating. You know, she got into the field initially part because she wanted to help people. You know, a lot of people in the medical profession go into the field wanting to help people, but it becomes more and more difficult when someone's just screaming at you at the top of their lungs to want to help them. You still always try to do a great job, and she is great at what she does, but like I said, it was already a difficult job, and now it's become near impossible after the pandemic.
Yeah, in my line of work, I could attest to that. I'm a speech therapist, so every day we have to show up with empathy. I think it's just open-mindedness. I wish when people come to a place when they need help or seeking help for some service or something like that, my hope is that people would kind of just open their mind and realize, yes, we're there to serve and assist, but we're humans. We're all humans. We all experience things. We all go through things. I wish there was some type of signage we could put to say, hey, we're all, I see it sometimes, but in a public place like a hospital or something like that, or schools, places where I've worked, even if it's a positive, check your attitude before you come in, I think that would help. I think it would take a higher power to enforce it, to enforce empathy. I know it's sad to say, but I honestly think that's what it would take. If someone's being irate and belligerent and belittling, I think it would take backup, maybe from law enforcement or someone to assist in creating that culture from not just the people who are the professionals who are expected to do it, but all of us who have to seek those services for different reasons.
I work at a popular coffee shop. It's very well known, and there is such an extreme lack of empathy in the customers that we have, literally every day. Like, it's exhausting going to work and doing my job, but it's exhausting going and being yelled at while I'm doing my job. And it's unbelievable to me. Like, I would never walk into a restaurant or a store or anywhere and yell at the people that are working. And it's just every day, the belittling, the rudeness, the entitlement is incredible to me. And I feel like, I don't know if it has anything to do with the pandemic or what. I kind of feel like this has been snowballing since before we even were shelter in place and people forgot how to act in public. I feel like there's such instant gratification with internet and with, you want things right now, and you have no patience. The population has no patience, has no empathy for the people that are working hard and trying to just do a good job and earn an honest living. I had to literally start my life over. And so I'm working in a job that is typically a younger person's job, typically a teenager, 20s, and the way the customers speak to these kids that I work with is it's so heartbreaking. Like, people are just mean, blame the kids, blame us if we're out of a product. Like, heaven forbid we run out of a product. Or if we make a mistake, it's literally just coffee, it's coffee. We can remake it. It's okay. But I don't understand how adults can come off like just treat people the way they do. And my thing is, like, I don't know, back in the day, remember when you used to think, like, oh, be nice to the servers, or they're going to spit in your food, that kind of thing? Well, that's kind of the way I feel. Like, don't they have concern about what's happening back there? Like, what if somebody retaliates? I've never retaliated. I've left crying many days. I have a lot of coworkers that cry at work, will be on the floor literally crying, and people just throw things at you. They belittle you, they just talk down to you. It's unreal. Like I said, I could never in my wildest dreams treat anybody the way that people treat me when I'm at work. And they don't know my story. They don't know why this older person is working in a younger person's job. They don't know. They don't ask. They don't care. Nobody cares. And I work hard. And I'm just trying to make a living for myself and, my kids. But it's rough. It's a rough life. So, which is sad because I don't even do anything. I make coffee. Why is that a rough life? I just don't understand. So I just wish that we could be more empathetic towards each other, and just have kindness and compassion and care about each other. Just mistakes happen. And if you're kind, typically that mistake will get fixed right away. And it's not that big of a deal. So all I could say is be kind, be patient, be considerate, and be empathetic towards everybody. You don't know what they're going through. Peace out.
Required, I think, is a strong word. I just would hope that would be that way naturally. I feel like when I go somewhere, I just want to be nice to someone so people are nice to me, So I don't understand. I know people have bad days, but I think that we should just the bottom line is just to be kinder to each other.
I told my children growing up that I had 3 expectations of them. Well, among other things, but in this regard to this question, I expected them to either have a job in food service, have a job in retail, or have a job doing some kind of customer service for somebody else. Because once you've worked in those environments, you can't undo that. It changes you personally. I was a Domino's delivery driver. I was a short order cook. I was a housekeeper, among other things, before I got involved in my professional career. I worked at Nordstrom's as a stockroom boy. And those are jobs that you have to interact with the public. Oftentimes you have to interact with the public that is not in a good mood, who is frustrated, who, for whatever reason, to the best of your ability, you did not meet their wildest dreams and expectations. And at the end of the day, you have to be the one there to say either, I'm sorry I did not meet your expectation, or let me see what I can do to make that right for you. And people who've had those experiences tend not to be the nightmare fuel. People who haven't tend to be the nightmare fuel. We have a daughter who works in the airline industry. And the stories she comes home with at times. She's actually dealt with customers, if you will, whose bad behavior has gotten them on no-fly lists or banned from airlines because of their incredibly poor behavior. I will not pause or hesitate to say that alcohol may have been involved in a few of those situations. But yes, people who tend to have been in the shoes of those people doing those customer service jobs tend to respect and understand, it's cool, we've been there. I know what you're going through. It's all right. It's not the end of the world that you misbagged something, or, oh my gosh, the eggs are in the middle instead of on the top. What idiot did this? Somebody who was rushed. Okay, we've been there. We get that. Come on. And anybody who gets that bent out of shape about it obviously has never had to deal with this a day in their lives.
Yeah, and I think when you see that happening, it would be nice if you stick up for the workers. I was in a bank and it was a long line and they had 2 tellers, and one of the ladies behind me yells out, "This is just taking so long, and why don't they hire more people? This is ridiculous." And it was just so weird and embarrassing. So I I stood up and I just said, everyone here is trying their best. Let's just, just take it, be mellow about it, and everything's going to be fine. Just, you need to calm down. And I think that the tellers they appreciated that.
On the second take, and you drop 3 F-bombs, and no, just kidding.
Yeah, the one thing I memorized that I get one male passenger, and like 1 years ago, and my language skill is not that well. I can't fully understand what he talking about, and he just want to ask me some about doing some dirty job, like yeah, but I don't understand at that time. And when we almost got his destination, and he asked me, "Oh, can we go to another place like a park?" I asked him, "So why?" So yeah, because you you uh you agree we do something like that it obviously that is just sexual harassment, and they say no. I said it's not gonna happen. I will call the 911 if you want to do that. He say, "Oh man, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you just drive me home. Yeah, it's fine." Yeah, that is the worst thing I ever encourage. Yeah, and then I'm a I'm doing the Uber driver right now. That is my that's my part-time job, so it's not that stressful. It's easy. It's easy to make money, but not that much. But I go to school right now, so I need a job flexible. Yeah, and I know a lot of Uber drivers they don't speak English, so when the passenger asks them to go to another place or ask or request something, they cannot, respond. But I think that is okay. Yeah, everything is not that hard. Nothing. Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Nature and pets of all sorts. Watching a small bird can be a humbling experience. The sight and sound of falling rain, beautiful sunrises and sunsets, a night gallery of stars, a cool shade under a tall tree, excited dogs playing a game of fetch, or even a cuddle from a fur baby. Over the years, our world is not only getting smaller, but also crueler. Cutting down the rainforest and putting animals at risk of extinction. Pets abused and neglected. I wanted to know if empathy applies to nature. My question asks, do you think the world lacks empathy towards animals and nature? And if you think so, what do you think we can do about this?
If you were to look in an animal's eyes, there's a natural empathy and compassion there.
Well, I'm a huge animal lover, so I'm not sure. I know a lot of people who really love their animals and they treat them like family, but then I know other people that when their pets get too old, they bring them to the pound because they're tired of them, and that makes me so mad. So I don't know. I mean, I think in different parts of the world, animals are treated different. Like I said, the people that I know and associate with, they all are big animal lovers. But I know that it just disgusts me when people are cruel to animals, because I figure if they're cool to their animals or pets, they're probably just as bad like that to other human beings.
It's difficult because, with some very rare exceptions, pretty much every pet that we're going to have, or any animal that we're going to share our lives with, we are going to outlive them. And we are going to have to deal with their end-of-life situation in some way, shape, or form. There are, and there are certain areas where you can have the best of intentions and something changes. Our son got a dog when he moved out, and he absolutely adores this dog, loves him to death, but his living situation just was not stable enough that he could effectively take care of this dog. Now, he could have just said, well, I can't really deal with this, and just turned it over to a shelter, and maybe they would have found a new home for that dog, or maybe that dog would have been put down. We don't know. However, he, thankfully, I guess because of the way that we raised him, said, I am not in a situation where I can really take care of them. Can you take him in for a few months until I can get things more settled? And we said, well, sure, of course, we can certainly do that. And 3 months later, we basically called him up and said, yeah, you're never getting him back. Aki's our dog now. Sorry, you want to come visit him? That's fine. and he actually said, you know what? Honestly, I'm fine with that. It's cool. But I mean, again, we're also now witnessing the fact that we have 2 rescue dogs. And those 2 rescue dogs, we don't know exactly what their lives were like before. We don't know what their health situation was like before. And so we're taking that on. We had to pay for this dog. His name is Aki, by the way. Bestest boy. But Aki needed to have a number of teeth extracted at a not inexpensive proposition, and for him, not a comfortable one. So we had to make adjustments and help him and do what we could, and realize this was an expense that we would have to incur. And knowing also that as he gets older, we don't know how old he is exactly. We're guessing he may be 10 or 11 years old. He might be older. So we don't know. We might have a few years. We might have 1. We might have less. But that's all part of what we have to work into the equation. And we could just as easily say, oh, we love this dog so much, and we're going to go to every measure possible to take care of him. But is necessarily extending a dog's life for our benefit the best thing for them? Are we prolonging their suffering, even if we are giving them extended medical treatment? So it's not an easy question. It's not something we could just say, oh, people who treat animals terribly, or people who put animals up for adoption late in life, or the scum of the earth. We don't know what the situation is necessarily. So I'm going to refrain from judgment there. But also, if you know that an animal is going through intense suffering, and even if you can give them treatment, that suffering's not really going to abate, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is, to put it bluntly, euthanize them. And that's always a situation that is a horrible and sad and agonizing thing to go through. Sometimes that is the best thing to do. But if you are going to do that, at least have, I'm going to lose it here. If you are going to do that, at least have the decency to be with them at that last moment. I got it. I'm good.
In China, in the Guangdong province, the sort of history repeats itself, right, Mr. President.
Right.
In China, in the Guangdong province, there was this strange disease that came up that nobody knew what it was. The Chinese didn't really tell anybody about it for a few months, November until it got to Hong Kong. When it got to Hong Kong, next slide, in a hotel in Hong Kong, and this was way back in 2003, someone from China went to the hotel, infected a bunch of people, next slide. And this is what you had. You had flights going. At the time, we didn't make any restrictions the way you did, which I think saved us a really lot of hurt. Next slide. And then this is what happened. There were 8,000 cases, 774 deaths. And that's how I get the number that I've been telling you, that the mortality of SARS was about 9 to 10%. If you do that math, that's what it is. Wow. Right.
Ever since Trump took office, there has been a growing number of anti-science threats towards Dr. Anthony Fauci and other federal and state health officials. One of the emails that threatened Dr. Fauci and his family stated that the sender wanted them all to be dragged into the street, beaten to death, and set on fire. A Mexican art critic destroyed a sculpture by one of the country's up-and-coming artists at its most prominent art fair. The large glass work by Gabriel Rico was the centerpiece of Mexico City-based Galeria OMR's stand at the Zone Maco. At least it was, until the art critic Evelina Lesper's klutzy intervention. Exactly how the sculpture, which featured a soccer ball, a tennis ball, a stone, and other objects seemingly suspended in a single sheet of glass, ended up as a pile of objects on the floor surrounded by debris and glass shards remains in dispute. Here I raise my 10th question. What do you think of empathy toward art and science? Do we have a responsibility towards them?
I think we should absolutely have empathy for the arts and the sciences. Unfortunately, I do see a growing skepticism in the United States towards experts and trusting experts of all kinds, whether that be in the arts and the sciences. We think that we don't believe what they're saying as much as we should sometimes take what they're saying at face value. I mean, they've spent their lives learning about a subject matter, whether that be their art or their science. And even though you may not agree with everything that they're saying, you still have to understand that it comes from a point of knowledge and experience, and respect it. Make up your own mind, but don't necessarily be skeptical towards it day one. I think it's too easy to just put down institutions because of whatever reason you want to fight back against the structure. But if you really were to think about it clearly, you would respect what they say and take it into consideration when you make your own independent decision.
I feel like we do have a responsibility towards art and science because some of us are old enough to have lived through the history of art and science, and we currently are living through the history of art and science. For example, COVID. It's 2023 right now, and so we lived through 3 years of that. And regarding the vaccine, it was trial and error. That was hard, but that comes with science. And a lot of illnesses back then, they had to do trial and error. And look where we are now. We're living up to 100 years old, and maybe even past 100 years old. As for art, there's always going to be a lot of criticism, a lot of critics with their own opinions, which is okay because that falls back on agreeing to disagree with each other. Everybody has their own eye of the beholder, meaning like people view beauty in a certain way. People think something's ugly, but someone's trash might be someone's treasure.
I grew up reading Joseph Campbell, and I loved his research on religion and the power of myths. If you read or watch any of his work, you'll discover how religions and myths have a connection and understand their place in the world. Extremists and cults destroy the fabric of our existence. I try to keep my belief system to myself, but it's so difficult when you see so much hatred, destruction, and sadness from their destructive behavior. I wanted to know if religion has a role in empathy as well. My question: does religion have a role in empathy? Do we need to take more responsibility regarding this?
Religion has a very important role to play in empathy. Religion shapes cultural values. It provides us with social norms. It helps us have a moral compass so that we are encouraged to or discouraged from behaving in certain ways. I think there are some religions that actually incorporate empathy, and we should look towards those as a good example. I'm not a Buddhist, but Buddhism has something called loving kindness meditation, where you think about others in a way where you have sympathy, empathy for them. And that is supposed to put you in a great mental state. But the proof of it all, in my opinion, is when was the last time you ever heard of a war fought in the name of Buddhism? Think about that. I don't think it's ever happened. So this is a religion that encourages peace, encourages thinking about others, and I think that's one of the reasons why you haven't heard of a war fought in the name of this religion.
I feel that religion has a huge impact on empathy. And me, as a Christ-centered difference maker, I find it my responsibility to show others empathy. And when I show others empathy, that means that I'm showing them love and kindness. And with my spirituality, I find it so fun and just so loving when I get to show others by volunteering, by helping out in my community, helping out at school. All of these things add up, and it really makes me feel so full and just filled with love. And there was a study back in 2020 that also showed that people who are religious are more empathetic towards others. So this is a real study where real life people are shown to be more empathetic towards others.
Talking about religion can be a very dangerous subject because people actually have some of the strongest ideological divides amongst religion and their political affiliation. I think part of the problem is that there's now a blurring between religion and politics, and people are using these things as a form of identity rather than using the tenets of the religion as a guiding principle. I think the majority of the world's religions talk about treating their fellow man and one another as you would like to be treated yourself. But we've gotten very far away from that. I grew up Catholic, but I find that even in Catholicism, we've gotten far away from the teachings of Christ, which is to help one another, to love one another, to kind of, if there's a foreigner, to help them. If there's somebody who needs clothes, you clothe them. If they're hungry, you feed them. If they're injured, you heal them. We've gotten away from that. There are sects of Christianity that follow a thing called a prosperity gospel, where the entire idea is to generate as much money as possible here on earth, which is stated absolutely nowhere in either of the books of the Bible, Old or New Testament. In fact, what's stated is that it would be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to attain heaven. And yet we've lost sight of that. And we actually are now using our religion as a way to turn against people, to hate people. When you take a look at the way that they've treated LGBT people, or to look at the way that they treat people who are of other religions, they're actually doing that in God's name, which I think is the actual definition of being blasphemous.
Movies and television was a big influence for me growing up. A cliche statement, perhaps, but accurate nonetheless. I was always excited to head out to the theater with my parents, getting our tickets, the smell of concession food at the lobby, warm buttered popcorn, the sounds of ice-cold drinks, walking around and seeing the beautiful movie posters on display like a gallery, and entering the auditorium, finding our seats. This was my place of worship. We would talk softly about the movie we're about to see, and sometimes my father would whisper into my ear what the movie was about. Then the room would get dark, previews would blast loudly, and eventually our movie would start. I watched so many different genres of movies, both past and present. I remember the laughter during comedies, the fearful gasps during thrillers, and the heartbeats during dramas. Movies became my religion. And television was just as important as going to the movies. I would watch children's shows, documentaries, morning cartoons, talking head shows, and even the news. I was always fascinated by the visual medium and how it was made and put together. Even in high school, I would go to my local public access television station and help out by operating their camera for talking head shows or boring city council meetings. My grades suffered, but I have no regrets. I really wanted to get involved with film and television, and I eventually went to film school at the College of San Mateo. I wanted to explore my topic of empathy with cinema and television in mind. We know what film can do for us as a viewer, but I wanted to ask if empathy serves a role as well. My question, regardless of the genre, do you think movies and television influence the viewer? Do they encourage or discourage empathy? Do they make the viewer do terrible things, or do they do nothing at all?
Empathy is an important topic, and I want to talk about it. I think empathy in Hollywood movies, they don't show as much of it, you know? You can't really relate to a character and empathize with them. So another genre that really helps me realize what empathy is anime. When I go to watch an anime movie, I see these characters and I grow to like their personality, even though they're not real. And then there's a certain part in the show or movie when you learn about that character's backstory. And that backstory is so down to earth, you can empathize with it. You can relate to it. And so at the end of the show or movie, when you see that character grow, you're happy or you're sad. I think us as humans, we don't do that as much. We don't ask people, friends, family, what their past is. So we can't empathize with them. But maybe if we did, we heard their story, we might be able to just empathize with them, even if it's a little bit. I think that's important, that we start to ask each other what your life was before I met you. That way you can get the full story. That way you don't walk in on an open chapter of someone's life. That's my story about empathy.
You can say that absolutely people are influenced by what they see, by what they read, but that seed has to be there for the person in the first place. I've seen every superhero movie and all these. I used to love boxing and whatnot, but that didn't mean I was ever going to be a person who thought that people should get hurt or that I was going to kill somebody or hurt them. You know, that's just not in me to do that. So we can blame television and movies and whatnot, but I think it's a responsibility within ourselves. That being said, you can make art that can change the way that somebody sees things. I know that you have a reason for that, and I know with my movies, whether it's Leaving or The Waiting Room or A Couple of Guys, they're all things meant to show a spiritual side of life. And some people won't get it, but other people, it will touch them. And I've also gone to film festivals and had people come up to me after, and this happens a lot, saying, thank you so much, because either you're representing me or I haven't seen that before, or I always had that question and now it's answered. So yeah, what we see and read and whatnot can influence the way we feel, but it's not going to make you a murderer unless you kind of have that chemical makeup.
Movies have such a big impact on people and what's socially acceptable and not socially acceptable. I think they absolutely have a role to play in shaping a better society. If all we see is people attacking each other, and it makes it more okay to behave in that manner. But I don't think that that's good for our society. There are certain movies. I actually just watched a movie that was really interesting. It's called Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, actually. And there's a great scene of empathy right at the end. It's a classic scene where the cyborg, who is being chased by the main character, rescues that main character from death, even though that character wanted to kill that cyborg and extinguish his life. And I think it's a great act of empathy that people don't realize. He feels like this person deserves to live. He understands the importance of life. And it's one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And more of those types of scenes where it's not preachy, but it's like beautiful and people understand it. We need more of that in our society.
Scouting taught me the importance of being a world citizen. Our world is becoming smaller, and pretty much the whole world is our neighbor. We are all in this together, and we need to start realizing this. My question asks, what can we do as world citizens to have more empathy in this world?
That's loaded. We can open our minds. That's the biggest challenge, I would say. If I see a dog on the side of the road that's hurt, naturally, I love dogs, so naturally I'm gonna want to help. If I see a roach stuck on its back on the side of the road, it's gonna take me to open my mind to realize that I don't have to like the roach. I really don't necessarily have to help it, but I don't have to kill it. I don't have to hurt it. You know what I mean? And that's a, outlandish, maybe to some extent, analogy, but it's just a thought. The opening my mind to other realities, to other things, outside of my own experience. And I think if we all can just take that extra step and actively listen and try, I think we can. I think we could. That's hard though. That's the hardest part.
I can see in the credits now no roaches were harmed in this film.
I'm sorry.
I think as world citizens, what will give us empathy, one thing that will give us empathy is traveling around the world and seeing how other people live. There was, about 10 years ago, I traveled around the world and went through Southeast Asia and Africa, and I saw how people lived there. There was a family in Indonesia where we rented a horse from them, and they were 12 people of 3 generations living in basically one shack. And I was amazed that first off they fit in there, but I was also felt bad that of all that I had and so little that they didn't have. That gave me great empathy for sure. Whatever they asked us to pay for renting their horse, we just doubled it. It was honestly one of those moments where you realize we have so much in the United States, and to travel the world and see how little others have, that by in itself would give you empathy.
Growing up was bad enough when I was bullied in school, but when adults put me down, or the homeless, innocent animals, it all confuses me. Are they getting anything from all of this? How is this behavior acceptable? I wanted to understand their perspective on why they behave like this. We are horrible creatures, or so it seems. My question asks, where do you think the lack of empathy comes from? Why?
So I really gave that a lot of thinking because I have so many opinions about it. And I think back, I'm thinking back to before 2020 when people did care about each other. I don't really know what happened in between that time. I think a lot of people lost their jobs, their families suffered, and they just stopped caring about each other, I ask that question all the time when I'm in the car and I see somebody cutting me off, or just somebody cutting me off in a line, or just not smiling or saying thank you. And all I can do is just make sure that I teach my grandkids and my kids, and I am humble and I treat people with kindness, and then just hope that that will spread, But I don't actually know when that happened, but it definitely did happen in my eyes after 2020, when a lot of people just started suffering in a different way, where we can't understand what's going on in everybody's home. So, yeah.
I think it's our nature, our human nature. I think empathy is also part of our nature, but I think at the core of us all, to some degree, we're self-centered. I don't want to say sinful by nature, but we think of ourselves. And I think all it takes is a few people's egos to get in the way. And I hate to keep going back to this, but other people may identify with it. And now here we are, everyone saying, I treat people how they treat me, just individualistic. It doesn't take much. I think at the heart of it, we all have our personal interests at the root of the way we move around in the world. And I think over time, as we've gone farther and farther away of how tradition has molded us to be, we've kind of just try to keep our personal interests at the forefront of what we do sometimes. And I think that's just keeps perpetuating, from even when you think of inspirational messages, some of them are solely about how we can improve our own wealth and grow. I mean, they're not all about how we can improve humanity or the world or nature. They're about us and about how we can improve ourselves, our own human condition personally. And I think that's how we have and continue to go in this direction of moving further and further away from empathy for others and other things.
I think part of it is just a lack of practice, as I've mentioned before. If you actively practice putting yourself in other people's shoes, that'll be good. The second part actually is cultural values. I only say that because I'm a product of two cultures, one Vietnamese, another American. Now, I'm going to grossly oversimplify both cultures, but the Vietnamese culture tends to value the family, the group more, while my American side values the individual over the group. And the moment you start thinking about yourself and not others, then you don't have that empathy that's out there. It manifests itself in things like respect your elders. We're always looking outside as a Vietnamese Asian culture to think about others first. And I noticed something only when I got older in the language that tells you how much the group is valued. Something as simple as writing your name. In the US, when you write your name as first and then last name, okay? That's understood. But your first name is really your given name and your last name is your family name. In Asia, it's flipped. Your first name is your family name and your last name is your given name. I know that sounds complicated, but let me just use the current president, as an example. If you saw his name written in the US, it would be Joe Biden. If you saw his name written in Asia, it would be Biden Joe. Family name first, given name second. Tells you immediately that your family is more important than the individual, and I think that helps to breed empathy.
One family and one glorious nation under God.
Trump and his followers have changed our country. Never have I seen so much change in such a short amount of time. My question, do you think maybe former President Trump encouraged his followers and rallies to be less empathetic and more demanding or to threaten other people if they didn't support him?
Well, I don't like Trump. And I totally think he did that. I think he just loved to stir the pot and get, his side, it's my way or the highway. Yeah.
I would say yes and no. I would say every group of people who has a way of thinking has a leader or someone that they look up to who shares their ideals. To some extent, I would say he himself did not create those type of ideals, but then sometimes I watch an old tape or clip and you directly hear comments of encouraging of certain things. I mean, he's not the only one, but since he's the most recent one we're talking about, I would say yes and no. And I say no because there are people who already felt that way as he has felt or expressed that he feels, and he may just just brought it out more. But I guess in a way, yeah. To some degree, he has. I'm not painting him out to be a villain. He's not the only one, but leaders are there to influence and to get you to go with their line of thinking. And how else do you do that? By encouraging certain behaviors, thought processes. And it has to kind of already be there for you to even want to listen to it in the first place. So I would say yes. I'm still going to say no to some degree. But yeah, I would say Sometimes he has.
Trump absolutely encouraged people to be less empathetic for his own gains. For him to divide people was a way that he could create an opportunity for him to win. It helped him fundraise. All these things were to benefit himself. He did it so that he could gain the power and the accolades that he wanted. I do want to put just one note on that, though. I don't think he created their lack of empathy. I think he just validated and encouraged it. Okay? And he did that because it benefited him. So I want that, I want to make that clear distinction. Creating that lack of empathy is very difficult in people. The seed already has to be there, and somebody just has to encourage it, or discourage it, or remedy it by practice. But he chose to push it towards a way that is detrimental to society, but benefits him.
We have video evidence of it. We literally have it. Take that person out, beat that person up, get this person out of there. The whole bit. Not at all willing to broach a dissenting opinion or any of the things about that. He made it very clear. And I'll be clear on this end too. I am not a fan of Donald Trump at all, and it's not something that just magically appeared. I've known about Donald Trump since the 1980s as a teenager, and I wasn't a fan of him then. And I'm definitely not a fan of him now. But yes, I absolutely feel, and I don't think it's a matter of empathy, I think it's a matter of quote unquote showmanship and pandering. It's him basically saying, I have control of this narrative and I want to encourage people and bad behavior. And I think for a lot of people, he allows them to say the quiet part out loud. And for those people, if that is something that matters to them, then that is a huge plus to them. And yeah, it lets them be mean. It lets them be the bullies. It lets them be the ones who don't have to show empathy. We don't have to show respect for others. We don't have to show any type of understanding for other people because we're right. And for those who feel that way, he's a champion. And frankly, that repulses me. And I'll go on the record and say that.
Yep, I agree.
Everyone has a skill of some kind, and some people have more than one. I know I have my own set of skills that I use daily, such as in my workplace or my filmmaking and photography. Having a skill does come in handy, especially in these times we are living in. I cannot help but feel the lack of empathy in our world, and I'm wondering if it's something that people haven't learned. My question, do you think having empathy is a skill?
Yeah. I think it's at its core, it's a natural subconscious thing, but the skill is having it for everything and everyone. Opening your mind is a skill. Taking the time to be curious and think outside of your reality is a skill that we kind of shut off when it comes to empathy. But that part of it, I think, is a skill. Applying it more than just to what we choose to, or what's natural for us to apply to our family, our friends, our children, our pets, outside of people outside or things outside of our own reality. I think that's where the skill comes in. Trying to see things outside of our own view is a skill.
I absolutely think having empathy is a skill that you can practice. Now, some people might be born a little bit more empathetic than others, but we can all get better when it comes to practicing empathy. And I think that just requires us to think about it more proactively, to put ourselves in the shoes of others. When we're in a grocery store, for example, we talked about that earlier, put yourselves in the shoes of the person who's packing your groceries. Like, look at how much they're working. You're on your off time and they're working evenings and weekends so that you can have your groceries. They live a difficult life. We all live a difficult life and we all have our challenges. Just by putting yourself in the shoes of just all the people that are around you, you can practice it and become more empathetic. And I think that's just going to lead to a better society. So I try to lead by example by doing that, even though I'm not always able to. But if you see somebody treating somebody poorly, like a waiter or something like that, say something. You know, it's even if they don't receive it well, maybe you plant that seed for next time they say, well, you're right. You know, maybe I shouldn't be this aggravated or this angry towards someone who's just trying to do their job and is really trying to do the best they can.
For me, empathy serves an important role, not just in our daily lives, but for the entire planet. Our world is not only getting smaller, but it's getting more distant with how we've been treating others. I want our planet back. I want people to get along. We need to do something now before it's too late. I feel empathy is just as important as air, water, and food. Of course, there have been people who've told me I'm way too sensitive and that this is just the new norm, but I don't want this to be the new norm. That's just something that someone believed in, and it somehow got into people's heads that this is okay. It's not. My question asks, do you think having empathy is important? And if so, why?
Gosh, empathy is so important for so many reasons. One of them is, you know, we live on one earth, and in order to coexist peacefully, we've got to sometimes compromise so that we create outcomes that are good for the entire population and not just ourselves. I use the word compromise intentionally. For some reason, compromise is a bad word in America. Don't compromise your values, you hear a lot. But sometimes compromise is the way you get to the best solution for society. Let me use the example of fossil fuels as in this context. The most uncompromising positions for fossil fuels are, I never want to use fossil fuels starting today, or I only want to use fossil fuels for the rest of my life. Neither of those solutions are really good for our society. The answer lies somewhere in between, in a compromise. And that's why I think empathy is important, so that you can compromise and create these positive outcomes for everyone.
We have an obsession about looks and sounds. We look at our favorite actors, singers, and even models on runways as if they're gods and goddesses. We either put ourselves down or someone else puts us down. I remember how much I hated the way I looked or talked. The bullies in school, or even my scout troop, sometimes would make fun of me. After a while, you hear it enough times and you start to question if it's really true. Sadly, for some people, they go into extremes and harm their bodies, commit suicide, or become something they are not. My question asks, how do you feel about empathy based on someone's looks or something else?
I'd say based on what's trendy. I mean, if someone's not in the in crowd in that moment in time, and we're very fluid, what we think is trending in the moment in time, but those who aren't always are we see it all the time. Someone who's not fitting the norm, or wearing what's in right now, they're overly critical. They show too much skin. Why are they wearing that? What statement were they trying to make? Overly critical. Sometimes borderline bullying comes out when something doesn't fit into what's going on in the moment in time, as far as fashion or hot topics or trending topics or things like that. I think you see lack of empathy more so sometimes, just because we live in a very entertainment-driven, hot, what's not culture right now, I would say.
Judging somebody on looks is something that we've all been guilty at times, but if you take it too far, it's going to lead towards having a society that's shallow. It's going to lead towards a society that just values people based upon whether they're attractive or not. And it's unfortunate because it leads to really bad outcomes. You know, the day when our society values people that show empathy towards others over people who can do the latest TikTok dance really well, that's a better society. When you ask yourself that question, do I really care about whether this person is like has 1 million Instagram followers? Who cares? You know, are they a good person is really what matters. And so the more our institutions and people can help perpetuate that value of valuing people for being good people as opposed to just being good looking or being like popular, that's the day when we'll have a better society. That's the day that we'll understand each other better. And I think that's the day that people will be happier, to be honest.
In 2007, my life changed forever. I was diagnosed with a rare blood disease where my body makes too many red blood cells, and if untreated, I would die prematurely. So I go through treatment from time to time. To add to all this, I went through anxiety and depression. I spent days and nights in endless fear, crying and basically not living. I wanted it to be over, and yet I wanted to live. I missed me, and I couldn't figure out what was going on with me. I eventually got therapy, and I started taking steps to overcome this. I still have anxiety and depression, but the only difference is I don't let it control me when it happens. More and more people have this disorder, and I'm glad, in a sense, that we're all realizing that we're not alone, and it's going to be okay. Jobs and schools are becoming more and more focused on expectations and goals, dreams, relationships. The list goes on forever. We are so hard on ourselves when we want to pursue things, and things get in the way of that. Toxic relationships, people talking down to us, demanding bosses at the workplace, and so on. I cannot help but feel empathy. I've always cared for others, but I realized the one person I haven't cared and trusted for was me. I didn't realize that was always the first friend I needed to count on when others didn't. My question asks, do you think the lack of empathy causes anxiety and depression disorders?
Absolutely. I mean, if we're talking about bullying and discriminatory things just because I don't understand, I don't care to understand, absolutely. I'm comparing myself constantly to something that I just don't fit into. I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to be depressed. I can't fit in. That's not me. That's not who I am. And I keep seeing it over and over, and I'm hearing it over and over again. I absolutely think empathy, the lack thereof, is probably a big driver for anxiety and depression, especially with social media. I would say absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I do think the lack of empathy can lead to depression and anxiety, insofar that not thinking about others allows you time to think about yourself, and thinking about yourself too much and overthinking about your situation can lead to depression. You know, your brain is always racing, thinking, am I good enough? Am I attractive enough? Do I have enough money? All those things, and those lead to anxiety. And if we were just to place ourselves out of our own bodies for a second and just observe the world, look at nature, look at people. Don't just focus on how great or how poor your life is and look at social media all the time, because that is absolutely going to lead towards anxiety. It's going to lead towards depression, and that unfortunately is what's happened over the past couple of years. And hopefully we can make that change. Make it cool to think about others. If you make it cool to think about others, then hopefully that should lead to less depression and anxiety.
Since our world is getting smaller and time is getting increasingly shorter, I wanted to ask my friends and people in my network to answer my last question in just one word. Any thoughts on what we can all do to have a prosperous future based on empathy?
Thriving.
Hope.
Understanding.
Share. Communication.
Unite.
Humble.
Kindness.
Education.
Participate.
I feel like I am dominating.
No, you
something.
are,
I am
because
so
I
sorry.
don't even know how to answer that.
I feel
My
bad.
brain doesn't work. Did you see
there's
that
science right there.
Did you
Let's-
see that? Yeah. Did you see that Miss America where she's interviewing the
Oh,
Miss
yeah,
America?
it's really
That's
cool.
me. That's me. Well, world peace week.
Well, also,
that would be me.
There's a difference between being. There's a difference between being in front of a camera
Yeah,
where I know
I
this
don't-
person could go, "That's stupid. I'm editing that out."
Yeah.
Or if he's gonna go, "Well, that's stupid, but that's
anyway.
brilliantly stupid. I am
She's-
so keeping that."
She's my spirit animal.
You know, when you're live
so
in front of an
funny
audience,
how we're married
can't
for
do
30
that.
years, and like that's because I'm like the listener, and he's like the one, you know, he has more to say. So it works. We work out that way.
And at different times, it's
Anyway,
reversed.
I
That's cool.
warned you, but I think you're doing good, really good. So I'm happy that you're good.
Well, thank you.